Boom. Okay, it's coming. Yeah. When's the last time we talked? About 3 months ago?
I've forgotten.
I have too. I can't, don't ask me. It could have been like 6 weeks ago. But man, March and April, like I say that and I look down at the screen and it's 555. Wow. We are coming out.
It's like we're on another planet now. But what I found particularly heartening is the children are pretty well onto it, as well as a lot of the adults, and those also waking up. Of course, it's like they're having, you know, their whole reality shifted almost overnight, and that to me has been very heartening, given the fact that we've got a lot of cognitive dissonance going on across the planet now.
Well, I mean, you know, I wonder how much cognitive dissonance there is, because if I look at, for instance, at these percentages of countries or whatever the study group is, the percentage of vaccinations, and I see it's all over the board. Like, and you already know if they're putting it out there that it's not going to be accurate. The question is, but there seems to be, you know, I mean, it seems like there's people not doing it, and if it's not that, then just conformance in some other way. But like, I don't know, 2020 was such a gift. It reminds me of that Ram Dass thing about, you know, the more you the work you do on yourself is your gift to the world, basically. So like that part of it. I got to tell you, the more I do this job, the greatest job in the universe, and I talk to people, and a lot of high frequency people, and it's just an honor to do it. I run into, I mean, I bet since the last time I saw you, 3 people, one of them was on this show, and I can't remember who it is. I was trying to remember who it was before the show. And this person's been out there a long time. I think it was a female. I know it was a female, and very, very high vibrational. And she said, you know, 10 years ago, I was really coming out. I mean, it was getting loud, the galactic and so on and so on. And I thought I was losing my mind. And then I found Mary Rodwell. And that's pretty much captures the spirit of what people tell me. I mean, so in my eyes, you're what I call an OG. So an OG, an original goddess.
Oh, I love it.
Well, in the urban vernacular, OG means like original gangster. But I guess it's somewhat the same. Well, yeah, you do have some gangster in you, don't you? You sure do. You're glowing today. You're absolutely radiant today.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I think I'm very blessed because I've obviously created a lovely place to be, where I'm insulated to a certain extent from a lot of what's going on. And also I've got at least one family member with my gorgeous little granddaughter that keeps me grounded. I've got a beautiful photograph of her where she spontaneously goes and kisses a tree, of all things. Spontaneously. She's
unrehearsed.
Just the most beautiful photograph. And she kisses everything and she waves at everybody. She goes and literally, she'll go and kiss anyone, and she waves like she's a goddess, you know, to everyone. She's the most amazing little soul, you know. And that is the future. One of the things that you might be interested in, I've just highlighted a few sentences from a 12-year-old that is having regular interactions with her star family. And she was talking to her star family because I said, well, what does Amy understand about what's going on now? And I'll just read you a few little lines.
Okay.
She asked her star family, so what's happening on the earth? And was told everyone is moving dimensions. The higher self of each person individually is working hard to bring into alignment the new dimensions upon earth. Every higher self on the planet is trying to do this, even if the person is totally unaware. Remember, this is a 12-year-old explaining this. Therefore, certain beings are creating that are creating many negative emotional situations and keep humans from changing dimensions. The higher energy vibration, the less emotional we become, the more we're in touch with the neutral happiness and harmony with the planet and each other in our lives. So there's a kind of energy battle, she's saying, between each person's higher self and the darker energy beings. But she's saying everyone will evolve to the higher dimensions eventually. No one will be left behind. It's just varying in timings. This moving dimensions is happening throughout the galaxy on many other planets too. The shift will happen to us all and lift us to a kinder, caring, less emotional reality, but the timings will vary. She herself says she's here to help people to connect with the earth, to ground people and help them to connect to their higher selves. She uses channeling, magic, alchemy, and says she comes from a different galaxy, many galaxies away. She's also warned there are many famous and popular people leading the spiritual world with many, many followers who are loving the attention and are not working for the best interests anymore. They are lowering our vibrations with their rhetoric and negative tales. And she also said vaccines are not good, but not everyone who has one will be affected, although many will. So there you go. That's from a 12-year-old and her connection.
Did she write that, or did somebody dictate it? Or
no, what happened was I asked her mother to ask Amy what she can say about what's happening on the planet right now, because I find that fascinating, their connection and their understanding. So she talked to her, if you like, her guide, her ET guide. She's got a name for her, and her ET guide came through and told Amy this. And Amy, of course, said a bit about herself and her own awareness of why she's here.
Man.
So that's a 12-year-old.
All I can say is holy shiitake mushrooms. That is the best intel. I mean, that's you could put that in writing and just put it out there. I mean, wow. And you said earlier that there were some adults, of course, that were tuned in, and you mentioned the kids. And when you said that, I was going to ask you, and you kind of answered it a little bit, but in terms of like consciousness, when you make that statement, is it more of a frequency thing, or will it be actual ability, say, to verbalize it, be that consciously internalized within you, where the human's totally on board, like what she just said, something like that, to know that? But, or is it just more of a frequency thing? I don't know.
I think the way I understand it, and I keep it really simple, that you know, and I'm keeping it just to say 3 frequencies. You've got the fear frequency that many are buying into at the moment. So that is one of the lowest frequencies, and the ones that are being used to create this cognitive dissonance in terms of the truth and what is being put out there. They're using fear to keep people in that frequency, so that you struggle then to go to another level because everyone's terrified they're not going to survive. So it's a really powerful one. But you go from that, where you're on that lower frequency, to the next frequency, which is ego. And she mentioned that with a lot of these,
that was great what she said, because I was a little bit surprised, because in the last, I want to say, week to 10 days on the show, there's been 2 or 3 times people have brought that up, and brought up, oh, these people are doing this and these people are doing that in the light worker community. But what this 12-year-old said or conveyed to us, that pretty much says it. It's the ego. It's ego. Pure and simple.
It's ego, and that's very close to the fear frequency. So if you're buying in to either of those, you will not be tapping into the higher consciousness of yourself. Your conscious oversoul. You can't connect when you are in those 2 frequencies. You have to, it's like plugging in electricity. You've got to have the right frequency of the plug to what you're plugging into. So if you're in either of those, you can't do it. Right. The only way you can do it is to get beyond that, where you are then on the frequency that you are able to connect not only to your superconscious, but these intelligences that are helping us to raise
the
our
team.
frequency.
Yeah, the team. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I want to talk more about that. And I'm reminded, Morgan channeled probably a year and a half ago one night, that these people that she's talking about were actually choosing to do that, to bring, to provide the catalyst, for themselves and so on. So as we know, everybody's role is to be revered. I didn't want anyone to think I was taking shots at anybody. Yeah, getting these kids out there, that frequency out there, that's one of our missions. I mean, it really is. And we get stories. Sometimes we get a kid on here, but just the fact that I heard what I just heard there, first of all, we'd love to get her and her mom on, that we'd do whatever we had to do. We'd jump through whatever hoops we'd have to, could do it anonymously or whatever. But really, I mean, if I've been doing this for 10 years, and I know people like you've been doing a lot longer, but that's the first time I've heard something that clear. I mean, I've heard them and they're clear, but that one, it's like the perfect balance of higher self, human, galactic. It's all right there. She's got it. She's centered. She says, this is why I'm here, to help people ground to the earth. So if that's being heard now, I'm sure that energy's coming pretty fast with these kids.
And the fact is that they fully understand. I mean, I don't know, did I mention the 11-year-old that
No.
about being a time traveler?
Tell us about all of them. Tell us about all of them.
I've only got a few, but I will tell you that I found fascinating, because this is a 9-year-old. And let me explain, he's been having interactions with beings since he reckons he was 5. He said the beings are about the size of 5-year-olds with black eyes and gray skin, and they put him to sleep and take him. But he said they're part of, the taller ones are part of the science team, and told him he was very special. Now listen to this. They told him many times, shown him many things on a screen, from dinosaur times to future times. He spoke in depth about God. God is something, she said, she'd never mentioned to him. And he said the older, bigger aliens told him God is not what most people think. And they showed him it's this vortex type black hole that isn't a black hole, but it's a violet light that creates. The aliens don't even know who created it or when. He went on to explain, now this is his out of body experience, which of course, what people need to understand, encounters through our surveys, we discovered out of 4,200 people, that encounters, most of them, 75% are out of body, not physical. That's crucial here, because this little boy explains, again, the mother said, I never mentioned this up. He said when his head starts to feel funny, it vibrates and his soul goes up through his head. And he said he can go anywhere in the universe. So he's astrally projecting there. And he said one of the other things he said was, he is a time traveler from the future. His real form is not the body he inhabits now. He is genderless in that form. Again, terms and concepts I had no idea he knew, his mother said. He says his alien form is really us from the future. They are us, we are them. He went on to describe how he had no nails and 4 fingers. So that's his time traveling. Then he talks about, when he has to be careful what he talks about, because they make him forget. He was visited, he said, once a week. There were other children like him when he's taken on board craft. It seems that he gets an in-depth education from these beings, and older, taller beings, which he said the older, taller beings have an IQ of over 400. Okay. The other thing he describes in detail, oh yes, he says they put him to sleep and take him on board. He gets nauseated afterwards. He went on to explain ultraviolet light as a creation spectrum. He says the aliens showed him this is what creates. He's shown past history in the future as well.
Wow. Wow. So they are us, because, we think it's non-physical and physical, but it's really all physical. It's just a matter of density, I guess. So when he says they are us and we are them, it has much more meaning. it makes me think like, wow, so we're at a level, say a galactic level, and we can actually split our soul or split our consciousness, or, I mean, this is getting, I mean, these are kids.
This is a 9-year-old.
They should be teaching us, right?
Well, that's what I've always said. The new school will be the children are given the place to actually teach us what we need to know,
Yeah,
and how we can help them be all they have come here to be, which is our teachers.
I bet we'll be good students, not like when we were kids. But yeah, but isn't that, you know, the same thing metaphorically as a pole reversal? I
Yeah.
mean, everything kind of goes like that, and then it stops and goes back that way.
Yeah. Because many of the hybrids explain that they have more of their extraterrestrial DNA. That's why they relate so much to being hybrids, and say that my real family is the Pleiadians, or I come from Orion or Andromeda or Arcturus, is because I believe they have more of that active ET DNA that is giving them that sense of connection to, their soul family. And many of the children, like I remember and I've talked about this about a year or so ago, where a young man, and he was either 9 or 10, and he said that it was his first incarnation on this planet, that he came from a planet where he was a blue being. And he said that he's come as a center seed, and to connect to the center of the planet to help with the pollution on this planet. He explained that he can see interdimensionally with his eyes open, so he is able to perceive the dimension. Wow. That he gets a bit confused sometimes. He picked a mother that had been on this planet numerous times so that she could help him understand how it works here.
Yeah.
Because, for him, he didn't really understand that, but he was able to heal with languages, these star languages. When somebody has an illness or whatever, he knows immediately from the frequency what he needs to heal that particular individual. He went on to a lot of other things as well, but wow, that's an overview of, what some of these children can do. And one of the most fascinating was a 9-year-old explaining to me that he was able to clear negative energies, and he was shown how to do that by the beings. He says, now, he said, Mary, I go out of body at night and I clear this for other children that are being bothered by these entities. So he actually does clearings at 9 years old.
That's amazing. That's amazing. If you think about it, if you are our aspects that are trying to vibrationally connect to us, they'd be much easier to work with because they don't have any blockages. That's I mean, right. They're not going to be going, oh, am I imagining this? Or, they don't have all that. You've worked with a lot of people over the years, and I've made reference to, I probably know 10 or 12 that have mentioned it. They've had sessions with you. So you've talked to a lot of adults. How does the clarity, of their experience, these children, compare to those of like adults that you've worked with? Because I know you've worked with a lot of adults who've discovered their starseed lineage and so on and so on. Is there any difference in their experiences when they relate them to you?
Well, absolutely. And the difference is clarity, because the younger the child, the more clarity they have with their connection to their multidimensional selves and, their, non-human family, or, that is supporting them, or non-human team. So it's only because of the programming on this planet where they're told this isn't real, this is just your imagination, stop doing that they start to close down. And many of the younger generations, they start to shut down because of peer pressure. They are told, they're laughed at or teased, and they don't want to be different, because the whole programming on this planet is you've got to be the same as everybody else. You can't stand out because otherwise you'll be bullied or picked on. So a lot of, and the teenagers go on to drugs or alcohol to shut down their awareness. So with the adults, I have if you like, a particular meditation, visualization, which is talking to their superconscious and asking the superconscious then to free them from any blockages, any programs, any implants on either in this lifetime or any other, so that when I take them out of that, then they have a clarity to connect more. Right. Whereas children, they are fully connected, and it is only how their parents react, how their siblings react, or family, that may shut that down if they feel in any way judged or made to feel stupid or silly, etc., etc. So why I did quite a few chapters on the children is because of the clarity, because they're not monitoring or editing anything. It's coming directly through. And that to me is very powerful, because this is hypnosis. Right. This is not in trance. This is consciously they are doing this. And like the little boy was talking about, you know, going through his head, his feeling of the vibration and how he went through his head to go to anywhere in the universe. I had a 7-year-old explain to me that he could go to any planet he wanted as long as he knew its mathematical number, frequency. He said, and then he would use the runes as a portal. With that frequency, he could go to the particular planet he wanted.
7 years old.
7 years old.
Jeez. You mentioned at the beginning about fear. And over the last few weeks on the show, there's been kind of something coming through, which is people, you know, expanding their sovereignty, stepping through fear. Yeah. And they're starting to experience virtually in, you know, what we used to call instant manifestation. Some people are using the term, we've come out of manifestation, we're in creation. That's what Franco calls it. How, from your perspective, how powerful is the relationship between fear and really stepping up into those higher frequencies like you were talking about? I mean, are we on the cusp of, we walk through a few more fears and we might see some really supernatural, amazing things?
It's a very good question. There was a thesis done that I was involved with in Western Australia, and it was a comparison between shamanism and abductions. And what this Simon Harvey Wilson, he's not with us anymore, he explained that actually the shift in consciousness with both was equally the same. And the interesting thing is, I have always believed that the UFO experience is, if you like, a modern day shamanic wake-up call, because the abductee or the contactee has to transcend their human fears, just like the shaman, before they can operate in a multi-dimensional reality. You have to transcend those fears. And this is exactly the same as the shaman.
Who are your other friends? I want to meet these people that come up with these theses like this. I mean, you know, to me, what you just said is mind-blowing, but it makes total sense, and it's always a simple, profound truth. So the shaman represents our ancestors, and the abduction scenario, or what's categorized, is our descendants.
Yeah, it's a modern day wake-up call. It's instead of doing the shamanic way, we're doing it through our ET interactions, because fear is paramount to start with. But as people understand more of their experiences and realize what's actually going on, they lose the fear. Their interactions completely change. They'll tell you this. They'll go from absolute fear to, oh, this is okay, as they understand what's actually going on, to the point where they have no fear and they're having conscious contact and communication with the beings from sometimes total fear. And I'll give you an example of a gentleman that did it right in front of me. He was absolutely terrified, not of being on the craft, but he said, when the eye, this big black eye, comes towards me, I freak out, and I don't know why I freak out. And I said, so what do you think happens? And he said, oh, well, I think they're probably taking me over, he said. You know, I don't know, but it freaks me out. I'm fine on the craft. I'm fine with everything else, but this freaks me out and I don't know why. So I said, do you want to find out why? What actually happened? He said, yes, I've got to clear it. I've got to clear it. So I took him to the eye coming towards him, and his body started to get more and more tense and more anxious. He was going like this, it's coming closer, it's coming closer, it's coming closer. And it got to a point where he was really getting freaked. Then all of a sudden, he relaxed. And I said, so what happened then? What happened when the eye got to that point? He said, oh, he says, they're just giving me information. That's all it was.
Oh my God. There's another golden nugget. I mean, you know, because your friend's thesis, and then if I think about someone like Morgan, you know, who I've never seen anybody that can connect so quick. I mean, it's obviously been through years and years of repetition, but she's basically doing the same thing this person's doing. Yeah. It's just his version, right? You know what I mean? I mean, this is what's happening. So one way or the other, be it an abduction, a shaman, some plant medicine, or whatever, trauma, this is really what's happening. And they're all getting us to that level of a connection to our higher selves, so to speak. Oh, I wanted to ask you that because you use the term super consciousness, and people talk about it different, you know, and the way I kind of look at it for myself. And I just want to ask you, where does super consciousness fit in with this? So I look at it as kind of like the human, the higher self, the oversoul, and kind of a monadic setup, right? So is the super consciousness, would that contain everything?
Yes. Okay. It you know, we have so many different names. It's whatever's comfortable for the individual and whatever their belief system is, where we're saying we're actually connecting to our God self.
Right.
For want of a better word. And you know, however you want to understand it, or the source, or universal intelligence. But I'll tell you one little incident that may interest people, given the fact that we've been having interactions with these beings all through history. Many years ago, I did a past life regression on a young lady. And I had, you know, she just wanted to find out what kind of past life she had. She was just curious. It wasn't for any other reason. She went back into medieval England, where she was a wise woman and a healer. And she said people came to me from the village, and I would, you know, have certain herbs, or I would be doing, you know, I'd be helping them on different levels with these different healing procedures and herbs. And I said to her, so how did you learn this? Who taught you how to do this? Who taught you what herbs you needed for this or herbs you needed for that? I expected her to say, oh, I was taught by another wise woman or a wise gentleman, or, you know, my aunt or whatever. She said, I learned all of it in the woods. So I said to her, in the woods? So who's in the woods, you know, that teaches you this? And she said, well, I go in the woods and there's a little being, 4-foot being, gray with black eyes, and he shows me which herbs to use for healing. So how about that?
I believe it. I believe it. If you look at, you just look at Egypt, you look at Samaria, Dogon tribe, you look at all these different places where there was an immediate, unexplainable burst of agriculture and technology. You know the story, and most of the, you know, most of the history, you know, the true history documents it. Yes. Even what is it? The Indian Hindu history. I don't know the names of those books, but they have the blue beans, they have spaceships, they have a nuclear holocaust. I mean, yeah. So, but what you bring up is kind of a triad thing to me. I see it as like the galactic, so our descendants and then our ancestors, yet they were all kind of here from the beginning, if you really think about it, and they're all pulling us up, or we're pulling ourselves up, or that is the triad, to this higher frequency.
Yes.
God, you got any more kid stories? You got any more children's stories? Yeah. The definition of children's books are going to be reversed now.
I will tell you, and I'm not sure if I've mentioned it on this show, was this whole business of soul and consciousness, because what we're doing now in the research that the free research is moving to, and it's the organization is now being called Consciousness and Contact Research Institute, because what we're doing is getting the scientists to explore what is consciousness. And this is really important, given the fact that if 75% of that 4,200 had their experiences out of body, we need to understand what that means in terms of what is consciousness, and how do we understand it. And I'll tell you two little stories. One of them's from an 8-year-old who explained to me that his family, his ancestors, were mantis beings. And when he dies, he's going to go back to being a mantis. That's his origin. He explained on board craft, sometimes, not always, sometimes he evaporates into a mantis body, in the mantis form, and evaporates, you know, like steam, he said. He goes over into the mantis body sometimes and then comes back into his human body. But I have had adults say to me that when they've been on board craft, one young lady explained that she was in a zeta body, a gray body, as a scientist, working as a scientist on board craft. So I said to her, so where is your human body? And she said, oh, it's over there, sort of waiting for her. And I said, so how do you get from this zeta body back into your human body? And she described a ball of light, literally leaving the zeta body and reanimating a human body. So when we look at these orbs of light that we see in photographs and we see and what have you, I believe many of them are exactly that. They are us out of body in the Merkaba.
Wow.
That to me, and she's not the only one that said that. There's been others that say that when they go on board craft, sometimes their consciousness is moved to another form for a task. So they're helping their star family do some task, then they'll come back into their human container. You know, just like we put on a deep sea diving suit when we go under the water, it's to them, that's how it is. So this whole understanding of what is the capacity of the soul, many have had operations on board craft where they've described to me when the beings needed to work on their organic brain, they would move their consciousness out of the way while they actually did some procedure on the organic brain to then take in the higher frequencies of their rising consciousness. God. So this is, you know.
I mean, you know, at some point you can always, I feel like you can always jump up to this higher perspective, call it super consciousness or oversoul or higher self even. Yeah. But the way this is all coming together, it's literally, you know, the physical bleeding into the non-physical. I look at these stories that you see on the disclosure sites and such, you know, the whistleblowers and all that talk, and there's a lot of good narratives, and you're looking at it going, there's some kind of, I'm not saying they're trying to promote fear. What I'm trying to say is it's being presented in a way, the way that I'm hearing it from you, it's a little bit different. Everything is kind of more in a positive flow. And I just wonder how close these two worlds, so to speak, are going to come together. I mean, if you know what I mean, you're saying, like, for instance, 75% of these experiences are out of body, but what about the 25? And is that going to expand?
One of the things that, because of the way that I work, because we're working with consciousness when you do hypnosis, when I work with someone in trance, I'm on that frequency too. That's what I discovered. And I'll give you an example of that. For example, it was a young man who had gone into hypnosis, wanting to explore his experiences, saw himself in another time as an ET. He saw himself with a gray zeta body. And he said, Mary, I'm moving something big from one dimension to another. Right away, I get, it's a planet. I don't say anything. Don't say anything. He goes, Mary, it's a planet. He said, and we've moved it too quickly and we've messed up its energy or frequency. So we're now going to have to write that. So here he's talking about a concept where these intelligences can literally move planets from one dimension to another, if that's accurate. But what was fascinating to me was I was getting the front loading right away of what he was seeing. So when you're in that frequency, I've discovered, you're actually often following them to whatever it is, whatever that frequency of information is, you're actually going there as well. And that actually completely opened my mind to the potential of what we're doing when we do hypnosis and when we're in that actual frequency. So what I have done when I take people into that frequency now, where they're on board craft, they're seeing themselves having a procedure, you can say to them, so any of the beings, do they look familiar? And usually they'll say, yes, because they've been taken usually right from childhood. And I'll say, well, look at the being that looks familiar and ask them how many times they've picked you up, just to get the conversation going. And they may say, oh, when I was 2, when I was 5, when I was 7, when I was blah, blah, blah. And they will just reel off the ages they've been picked up. Ask them now why you're here. Why are you here for this particular experience? You know, in terms of what are they doing? Oh, they're just doing a checkup. They've told me that this is needed every so often. I said, have you got any questions? Yes, I want to know, you know, what's my connection to them? Right, we'll ask them. So they'll have a conversation. And then I'll say to them, have you on any level, consented to this? Right. Usually they'll say to me, yes, before I came here. And I will say to them, does that resonate with you? Yes, it does, but I'm not very happy about it. You know,
yeah, they sound like humans on Earth, so there's no difference between a human and an Earth one.
But you've got a conversation going where they are getting their own answers in that space because there's no time. The thing is, people say, well, how can they do that? Because that was some other time, but it doesn't matter. When you're in that frequency, you can do this and they can get their answers. They can get their understanding. However you want to interpret that, they'll come out of it and they've answered, you know, that can be a page of questions they've had answered via their communication in the trance state with the beings that they're interacting with. And they'll often find out there's extra DNA that's been put from one of the beings in there. Is there anything else? I will say to them, is there anything else you need to know? Ask them. What else, you know, have you got any other questions? And that's what they'll do. They'll come out of it and say, thanks very much. I'm sorted. You know, that's it.
But it's mind blowing because it makes me wonder, okay, how do I put this? Are these metaphorical experiences unique to the individual that all, when said and done, is codes coming and you're expanding or whatever, or to think of something, and it obviously could be both and probably many other things, but it's fascinating to think that our future selves coming in and assisting us physically, you know, so when people talk about changing the past and this and that, but I mean, this is actually really interesting because obviously it's not for nefarious purposes. And I think many people that are here, you know, connect and they get upgrades or through sessions and activations and so on. And the other thing I was, you know, interesting to hear you say was the thing about when you're basically going with them when they go because you're at the same frequency. And I can vouch for that because in my relationship with Morgan, whether we're together or not, and we're connecting, that's typically she's the transmitter. But as we go into it, I'm right there. And many times there's visuals and many times it's the same thing. And sometimes there's been apparitions, you know, but yeah, so that's, I would think that that's the type of frequency that's going to continue to expand and include more and more people.
Absolutely. And the information, I don't know if I've mentioned it on your show or not, but I remember asking the team, you have people sending me all these scripts all these symbols, I'm shown all this artwork and what have you, and I can only show a minuscule amount of that information. So it's frustrating for me, because I believe, you know, I want to share as much as I possibly can, knowing how it activates these new higher frequencies. And so my answer was, but Mary, you take it on to your energetic field. Everything you see, everything you experience, like everybody, we take this onto our energetic field. Wherever you go, those that are ready for those frequencies will tap into that, and they will get it.
Right.
It's all like, you know, there's an exchange of frequency. And at the time I was pretty skeptical, I have to tell you. I said, oh, come on, you know, you're going to have to prove that one to me, you know, because I can be a bit of devil's advocate with my team. I'll say, you've got to prove this. Within a week, I was at a Conscious Living Expo, and I was on a panel, and actually I wasn't saying a great deal. There were a lot of other people talking. And then a woman stood up in the audience who knew me and said, Mary, I've got to tell you this. And I said, what? She said, you're not really saying a great deal at the moment, but she said, you're beaming out all these frequencies to the audience, and I just needed to say this to you. And it was like, right, okay, get it now. I get it. Thank you. So every one of us that is taking on these frequencies, everyone that is open to these frequencies is also broadcasting, I believe, the frequencies wherever they go, wherever they are, whether on a plane or whether you're whatever, and people will be accessing those frequencies.
To greater effect than those who are within earshot. Exactly. Well, no, that's not true. I mean, but you know, versus the words being spoke.
That's right.
I mean, a couple things seem to really be in the air, and it's these leaps of faith to a higher degree, because it's the same cycle, the same direction as all the leaps of faith that got us here, since we all went through dark nights of the soul and all the different aspects and so on. So here we are. And then the other thing is, and I may have mentioned this to you before, but I'm going to kind of mention it now, because it's a whole different atmosphere today. And that is a lot of people talking about over the years that there's going to come a time when we're going to be put to work. And that feels really, really different than it did a year or 2 years ago. It feels like right now, and almost see people being put in position to do that, because I've heard several people say that on the show here in just the last week.
Yeah.
Does that ring true for you? I mean, you've been doing this for a long time. Do you feel like things are ramping up? How are you feeling about everything?
Look, I've been taught, I've made a joke sometimes, because I'm English, and although I'm English Australian, I make a lot of jokes. And I said, I've got this vision of myself where they've put me in the coffin and they're nailing down the lid and saying, hold on a minute, Mary, you can't go yet. There's some more emails for you to answer. I've got a feeling we'll be working right up to the moment.
Right to the last second.
Right to the last second. And I've been given this sense that we've only just started the major work.
Yeah. Yes.
That's what I feel. That
yes.
And the ones that are, I've met many wonderful souls that of the older generations like myself, and saying, but I'm getting too old for this. And I'm saying, no, you're not. You've got all the wisdom, all the experience, all the understanding. You're one of the bridge builders that have known the old paradigm and understand the new. You are going to be the ones that help the youngsters and the other ones that are struggling to actually process this new awareness, and because you've done it yourself. So that's going to be very much the mandate, is helping, and we'll have the protocols to do it, because there are going to be many within this new awareness that will need, if you like, tools to manage it, because they haven't yet developed any. And they're going to be all over the place. They're going to feel they're going crazy, or they're going to be afraid of judgment and all these kinds. I'm meeting it now. I'm seeing it now with people that come to me, especially those that have had a higher education, because they've been so programmed into the 3D that, any multidimensional experience scares the living daylights out of them. They're afraid, or they're being told that they will go crazy, or demons are going to get them, and all this kind of stuff. So they're really seeking a way of managing this expanding awareness, and grounding themselves with it, so they can operate with it in a balanced and healthy way. And a lot of our role is to say, look, we've been there, we've worked it through, this is how we did it, and to give them the tools so they can manage this new awareness, because this is going to be exponential, absolutely exponential.
Yes. Yeah, that would make sense, because there's a lot of bona fide, legit healers with a lot of different, types of specialties, be it sound, color, channel, whatever. And I go back to what that 12-year-old wrote. I mean, to me, that's one of the things I've seen change in the time of the few years I've been doing the show, is that whole atmosphere of energy practitionership is changing. And what that 12-year-old was talking about, where it becomes more about the I, the persona, and less about the, the equal energy exchange or the healing or the alignment. But I think part of what's happening is, and I don't know if this applies to everybody, but intuition, feeling, gut feeling, sensitivity, seems to be more of an accurate guide. And it seems like people are able to detect, like babies and like animals, who's not being straight and who is. So hopefully that we'll see that type of thing happen with those that need these people, because I think there's going to be a lot of people that do need them.
What we have to be aware is that it's all very, you've got to walk the talk. And to give you an example of that was very clear to me, was a lady wrote to me about her daughter who was 3 years old. She said right from birth she was telepathic. She would tune into everyone around her. And she said, so once they realized that she was picking up on everything, they had to be very, very aware of that when they were around her. She said, Mary, she's 3 years old now. Have you any idea how tiring it is to monitor your thoughts because your daughter's picking up on them? And this is really about us really looking at what we are putting out on that frequency, because it's not just got to be what we say. We have got to walk our talk. And that means in everything that we do and everything that we think. That is the only way we are going to raise our frequency into where we need to go. So that's a hell of a challenge.
Well, it seems to be getting louder, though. I mean, everybody's stuff is getting louder. And this last, March and April, a lot of people talked about grief, and they talked about, there was a lot of solitude. There was a lot of people diving deep, and it felt like a final preparation. I mean, I can't even imagine what we're going to be like by the end of the summer. I feel like we have that much potential, and you use the word exponential. It just, you've been observing this a long time. Is it my imagination, or is it just moving more and more rapidly as we go?
Oh, look, I couldn't have talked like this even 5 years ago, I suspect. It's like all the UFO stuff, 20, 25 years ago, I was definitely considered somebody with the tin hat brigade, that this whole business of believing in aliens and what have you. And there was always in the media the laughter and what have you. And I'll give you an example of how daft it was. I was doing a breakfast show on television, probably now about 10 or 15 years ago. And obviously a lot depends on how you present yourself. And I remember these two presenters, one was female, and she was the one that I found quite unbelievable, because I'm sitting there in my suit and she's saying, do you know, Mary, you're sitting there and you look just like my GP, she said. I'm almost inclined to believe you, simply because I was sitting there in a suit looking normal. What? So that, what kind of mindset is that?
Right.
It's bizarre. It's absolutely bizarre. But really now, it's a different tone. And because also I've always said to people, particularly those that are coming out with their experiences, as long as they're confident with their experiences, and talk, if they can portray their experiences in a confident way, they're more than likely going to be believed now. Along with, and with me, they're on a loser because I play them at their own game. I remember doing one of these in-depth interviews on some news night, whatever, and I was sitting there in the studio with this, what I call a clever clogs kind of presenter. He thought he was something else. And he said, right, he says, Mary, he says, so tell me, he says, what do some of these aliens look like then? He was really trying to take the piss, and I said, do you know what? I said, some of them look exactly like you. They even showed that.
You said that on TV.
They actually showed that scene again on highlights at the end of the year. They actually showed that as well.
Oh, and the crazy thing is, and it's like part of this, I guess, that's happening as we go through this, the whole suggestive narrative, all the narratives out there, they just don't stick anymore. Right. I mean, they just don't. And one of the things that's happening now, and this has been called for a long time, and you would know this because you've been in it, doing it so long, is the whole Project Bluebeam type thing. Like every day you see 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 articles on this government agency, and this court said you better release UFOs, and they saw another one. And I mean, it's like, it's going to break at some point. It's going to break. It has to.
It's interesting that there's no big fanfare. It's like they're putting it out.
Yeah.
The NASA saying this. We're looking at this now and whatever. And it's not creating any reaction.
No.
No one's sort of going, oh my God, there's blah, 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 blah. It's like, oh yeah,
Mm-hmm.
right, here we go again. Oh, they're going to do this and whatever. And what I'm finding is also in the spiritual world, a very big shift from the metaphysical and the ufological
Really?
ET side is, in the sense that it was always either spiritual or it was UFO, and it was ETs. Okay. They were separate. They were very separate. I'd have people coming from the spiritualist fraternity coming to me and saying, Mary, I'm in a closed circle. We can talk about fairies, we can talk about elementals, we can talk about ascended masters and Jesus and Mary and all the rest. But for goodness sake, I can't talk about my guide being a blue being with big black eyes, because I can't mention that, because that's not spiritual, is it? That's not spiritual. And it was this interesting difference between interpretation. And I would say, look, for someone who's seeing the angelic realm, for someone else who's not in a religious belief system, it will be a light being.
Right.
Same saying.
Well, yeah. Well, I was just gonna say your friend's thesis. I mean, that says it all right there to me.
Yeah.
I mean, that's I'd love to read that. Is that published?
It is. It was at Edith Cowan University in Western Australia in 2000. I might have it somewhere, actually. But what was amusing, this is in 2000. He was very much part of a paranormal group. He did a wonderful thesis. And I remember being interviewed by the panel that was going to give him permission for the thesis. And they came and I was sitting in this panel. It was like grilling. They were grilling this weird ex-nurse counselor who is helping people with ET experiences. You remember, this is 20 years ago. And one of them was saying, well, who do you go to then to be supervised? What psychologist or psychiatrist do you go to be supervised for you helping these people? I said, do you want to know? I said, it's actually the reverse. They come to me and ask me to help them with the ones that they're having these experiences. And the shock on their faces, I'm not a psychologist, you see. I've got no credentials as far as they're concerned whatsoever. So the horror on their faces was, they come to you, what?
Man, you are a gangster. You are a straight gangster.
Get get over yourselves, mate. I've had referrals from the psychiatric emergency team who've sent me people that have had ET experiences.
Is that right?
This was when I was in Perth. There were several. I said, who referred you? Oh, the psychiatric emergency team actually said you need to go and see Mary Rodwell.
That's fascinating. In your experience, I mean, you go back. I mean, you're talking 2000 right now, and you're already deep in it. So you must have go back to what, the 90s or 80s or what?
Yeah, I really got involved in creating a CERN around about 1996, 97.
Okay.
But I had been already exploring a lot of the multidimensional before that, in healing, doing energy work, hypnosis, past lives, all that stuff. So it led into my first client, and realizing that this wasn't rare, because we advertised an abductee support group in the Perth, one of the big Perth papers, and 12 people literally turned up for the first one out of the blue. Jeez. And I realized it was not rare. I thought it was really rare that people had these experiences, and it showed me that it wasn't rare at all. In fact, a newspaper made a cartoon about it, this abductee support group now, and they had one of the pop stars in there talking about his ET experiences, saying, look what we've got now, an ET weirdo support group in Perth, taking a piss.
Have you ever, I mean, in all your years, how many military people have you run across? I'm just curious.
Lots. And
really?
I've also, in terms of whistleblowers, there's a number. But what has been even more significant is the individuals that have had ET experiences in my lab as well. Because that was something I was completely unaware of, was the numbers of people that have been taken to underground facilities and been interrogated or drugged, etc., etc. And what I discovered was the most traumatized were not the ones that had just the ET experiences, but the ones that had been MyLabbed, because they were the ones that were the most traumatized, deliberately so, by the military, because they didn't want them to talk about it. They also didn't, knew that they wouldn't be believed, because who's going to believe that there's humans doing this? No one's going to ever believe that. And also because the military want to know what happens on board craft. So they're interrogating them so they can have more understanding of the different agendas of different species. So that's the other reason they pick them up, is because they want to know as much as possible from those that have the experiences. And interestingly, many of the experiences will tell me as soon as they've had an interaction, the black helicopters are outside within minutes, because they see the portals open. They're aware of also those that have the energy signature of being an experiencer. And that's how quickly they can now be on. And one gentleman in England told me that he knew he was being used by the military. He discovered that because he could call them in and they would let him know when they were coming, the beings, the military were monitoring him so that they could be there as that interaction happened. He said that they were using me, Mary. So I had to find another way of communicating so that they wouldn't pick it up, because it's all about frequency.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. I mean, at the Soulogy Fest, we're going to have at the end of this month in Sedona, my friend Stephen Popiotech is coming. He's pretty connected. I think he's probably about 50 or maybe a little older. I don't know. So he's been woke since like 20, and a lot of it's been galactic related, and he's a MyLab survivor. So he's got a real interesting mix, and he's got some interesting stories in regard to the interference, the military, that type of thing. But yeah, it makes me wonder sometimes how many people are waking up every day with things erased. I mean, I wonder, are there, I know there's certain psychotropic programs and mind control, and I know that we've expanded, and I know that we control our frequency, but it just makes me wonder how deep this trip went, because there seems to be a lot of players, number one, and they're a lot closer to us than I once thought. You think they seeded us, they were our ancestors, and they came and visited every now and then, but there just seems to be a lot of involvement.
And there's also those that I can tell you two cases. One is Niera Isley, who wrote the book Facing the Shadow, Embracing the Light, where it was through body work she realized that she'd been abducted and taken underground, both here and also on the moon. She explains that when she connected to her star family, she was told by them her agreement was to have the experience so she could write about it and expose it. So her star mandate was to do that. But an 11-year-old, no, sorry, he was 9 when he told me this. I actually wrote it in The New Human. He explained he was 9. He's someone who was a light physicist on Orion. He said to me that he remembers being taken to an underground base on this planet. He said where there was a woman in a military uniform standing in front of him. He was sitting in a chair with some technology to one side. And he said, and what that technology was doing, Mary, remember he was 9. He said the technology was lowering my frequency to a level where they could actually put information in. And he said, I knew what they were doing, so I kept my frequency higher so that it wouldn't work. He said, and most of the time I was able to do it. So he knew exactly what they were doing and what he needed to do to counteract it. Now, this is a 9-year-old explaining this to me.
Mind blown. Wow. There's got to be a lot of kids.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of kids.
That experienced that.
Well, think about even, and I don't know what to believe, but, and this may not be the right example, but like they talk about these holding pens or facilities here on the border where they're keeping lots of kids. But can you imagine a space with a significant number of children unimpeded, just, just being themselves, what could come through?
Yeah. And remember, a lot of these young kids, particularly those from 2000, one young lady, Lee Capitelli, who explains herself as a homo novus, and she mentions her story in my book too. She was saying, Mary, everyone from 2000, they are another upgrade of human. They're far more awake. Well, you think of the children that they have access to that have this awareness that they can actually use and manipulate. And we're talking everything then from super soldiers to
it's deep. I mean, I try to keep my mind open, but I listen to some of these people, and I'm like you. I'm somewhat skeptical, but I have to stay open. And I know probably half the sites in light worker communities are psyops, and also with the element of what that 12-year-old said. But what I hear, I mean, there's a lot of very credible, testimony. I mean, it's just, and then you look at it and go, well, then why are they allowed to keep talking? And then, I don't know, it gets a little confusing, but one thing I got to say, there's some very credible stories out there, and I could name a lot of names, but that's what kind of intrigues me too, is because if you look at what you were talking about with the two people being at this certain frequency and what that brings in, and I'm thinking when you were talking about it, wow, that's why they say they can only do it a little bit at a time, because there's a whole bunch of people out there that if you just threw that onto their field, they would freak out. Yeah. But then you got the other end of it, which is this kind of a parallel race with disclosure, and you can see it's coming out, and it's just such a weird mix. It's like it's almost like we're in the middle of both, right?
I think one of the things that Dr. Lena Olson, a good friend of mine from Sweden, was saying about her downloads. And she said she was shown, I think it was the mantis. I'm not sure if it was now. Don't quote me on that. But she was saying they were explaining that we were moving into two frequencies, low frequency people and high frequency people. And that that's the soul choice. The soul choice to stay in that or to go on the other one. And in a way, we're getting exactly that now. We're getting the polarities. People are separating out the believers of the narrative and the ones that are saying that's not accurate, that's not resonating, and my feeling is it's the soul being challenged to speak its truth, to resonate to truth, and not to rely on other truths or so-called truths or whatever, because we're in a mix of all of this information, and the only thing we've got at the end of the day is ourselves.
That's right. I mean,
that's all it is. Just your instrument.
I think about it, because you hear mind, body, soul, mind, body, spirit, right? And I think, well, if they're truly all the same thing, this body is the same thing, then how do I know that me going back to oneness isn't my physical body, what we call dying, and the God particle that it is goes back into the mother, and then that's oneness. So in other words, will there be any part of me that I've come into contact with, whether I want to refer to it as galactic, future, past lives, whatever? Is there any part of me that I've been exposed to that I have to look forward to? I really don't know. All I know is right now, right? Yeah. I mean, I think we've got an opportunity, and I think I might have said this to you before because you always get me excited, but an opportunity to do something that's way beyond our imagination. And I love what you're saying too, because it's like we bring the balance to the imbalance of the world to the balance in ourselves. I mean, if that's the code, I think we can all break it. No doubt.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, why would we bother to incarnate if if we've got a task to do, and at the end of it, we're going to know as a soul whether it works or not. So, why would, personally for me, if I saw and I saw that there was a positive outcome, I'd say, right, I'm in for it. If it said, no, you're going to work really hard, Mary, but it's going to be a waste of time.
Yeah, take one for the team.
I'll give
take one for the team.
I'll say, no, I'll give this one a miss, thanks.
No, that's this world. That's this world. Just take one for the team. Do it. It'll come back to you. Sacrifice, suffer. God, I feel like this May, this month, and it just feels like, and maybe it's the same rhythm at the same time from the previous year and the previous year and the previous. But to me, 2020 was bigger than the 10 years prior, and the first 4 months of this year have been bigger, 10 times bigger than 2020. But in a good way. It feels like everything is going our way. Yeah. And what I mean by that is kind of like what you were talking about with the 9-year-old. We have this frequency. The metaphorical representation is that machine that was going to lower his frequency, and he just maintained his frequency, and most of the time he was successful. And that's kind of how I feel, because we don't hit 100%. Yeah. But I think we're hitting in the 85, 90 percentile sometimes and sustaining it. And it's exciting too. And you know this because I see your announcements and stuff. There's a lot of, there seems to be more coming together, be it virtually or in person. And I think just by the proximity of the soul's energy that and the intention and so on, that's kind of pulsating out, building this too. Do you have anything coming up? The last book you still wrote, that you wrote is still the New Human, right?
Yes, that's right. Many years ago, my sister went to a clairvoyant, and this is before I even came from England. And this clairvoyant, and then I was mostly just a counselor and a mum. So this is now 35 years ago, nearly 40 years ago. My sister was told, your sister Mary, she's going to write 3 books. And I remember her coming and telling me, Mary, this clairvoyant said you're going to write 3 books. And I said, oh, you've got to be kidding me. What am I going to write about? I remember saying to her at the time, well, it looks like there's another book at some point, but I've no idea what that is. So, and I'm already over it for a while.
It'd be your life story would be cool with anecdotes. You must have, I don't mean to keep you, but I just got to ask you a couple more things. You must have taken some heat, like David Icke-esque type heat. I remember talking to him, and I think his was 93, 94. And he was describing how people made fun of him everywhere he went. right? I mean, I don't know if you had it that bad, but you're not shy. Number one, you're also very committed. I can tell to whatever you do. You know, the way you speak about everything, where you live, your family, your work. So you must have been noticed by a few people. You must have caught some heat. That's what I'm saying. Did you come from a family of like seers or any, was there any continuity, or were you more like a lot of the star seeds that come on here and they talk about how they were the black sheep or the one that was different?
My mum, I believe, was very clairvoyant, although she never really understood what that was. She was an actress and was a brilliant actress, but she ended up going into astrology, teaching herself astrology and what have you. So I always feel it came from my mother's side, particularly. I'm not so sure yet about my father, but the bottom line, wonderful thing about my mum, she was open to everything. Yeah. So although we were brought up Catholic, she would go to mass in the morning and go to a spiritualist church in the evening. And she'd say to me, "It's all God, Mary," you know, even though she was a committed Catholic. Yeah. She just saw God in everything. You know?
Your mom was a gangster too.
She was a gangster. So, and I remember her saying to me, "Mary, you can be anything you choose to be." And I even wrote to the President of the United States asking to be an astronaut when I was 16, but I got no answer. And I was very pissed off about that because I quite fancied myself as an astronaut.
I wouldn't rule that out yet. I wouldn't rule it out. The way things are going, you never know. Mary, thank you so much. You're such a great example, and I'm so happy that you're with us on this journey because you offer so much, and I just thank you on behalf of everybody. And I look forward to seeing you again. And I really appreciate the time that we have together always.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure. And thank you so much for all you're doing and your beautiful wife, because so much of what you're doing, I think you'll never know how much that reaches everyone else through the medium of what you're doing all the time, the love and the energy and commitment. So the same goes right back at you.
I accept and receive equally. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Take care.